The Brewers stay hot. They've been the best team in baseball for roughly a month now. Jacob Misiorowski outdueled Paul Skeens to close out a series against Pittsburgh at home. We're going to recap everything for all of you listeners. This is the Brewer Fanatic podcast. Before we jump in, we have our now customary question about how our weeks are going. So, Spencer Michaelis, I'll let you go first as I usually do. How's your week going? And do you have any plans? Jackson Churio's number one fan asks for the weekend.
I've got nothing really in the plans for the weekend, which I have to do some stuff with my car. I'm probably gonna have to get some things fixed, so that won't be a super fun part of my weekend. But otherwise, the rest of the week been going pretty well. I've definitely been enjoying the Brewers baseball since we last recorded, and pretty uneventful week for me. So, but I know you had something very exciting happen for you last night, Jack. You were finally able to get a game in, so you got to tell everyone how softball went last night.
We got walked off.
Oh,
First loss of the year. We were 3-0 to start the season. We were playing the other top team in the league. This is the team that we upset last year to win the championship. We beat them in the first matchup this year, rematch last night. And I remember going into the game, the things that we had talked about was number one, we just need to score enough runs because it's slow pitch softball. And number two, we need to play really tight defense against these guys because they can hit. So don't give them extra outs. We played our worst defense of the season, and we went into the bottom of the seventh, leading 11-9. So I don't think anybody expected that lead to hold up. But 3-1 still isn't bad, and I'll take that loss against them if we end up having to face them in a playoff game again this year. So if we can pull out a W next time, I'll be okay with it. But a little bit of a sour taste after finally getting back on the softball field.
yeah, that is tough. That's tough. But there's this thing in the NFL. I know you're not a football guy, but teams that beat the other team twice in the regular season basically never beat them in the playoffs. The other team seems to always win that game, or at least fans seem to think that's the case. I don't know if there's real numbers to back that up, but everybody always says that. And maybe that's what you're going for here. Your team knew that. They didn't want to go into the playoffs with a 2-0 record against that team. So I think that was probably just good strategy on your part.
Yeah, maybe. So we'll see how that goes. But we can jump into reviewing the 6 games that the Brewers have played since our last show. We'll start with the conclusion of the last road trip, the Brewers going to Minnesota, where they swept the Twins in largely decisive fashion. It got a little bit interesting at the end. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But game 1, the Brewers stomping on the Twins 17-6. Although the score is a little bit misleading in this one because this is a very close game, a pitcher's duel through the first 5 innings. The Brewers did not have a hit until the 5th inning against Joe Ryan, and they scored 16 of their 17 runs after the 5th inning. Jacob Misiorowski, meanwhile, took a perfect game into the 7th inning, and then when he came back out, he went leadoff walk and then a Matt Wallner 2-run homer. That ended his night, but 2 starts for Jacob Misiorowski into his big league career, flirting with a no-hitter in both of them, not allowing that hit until he got into that 7th inning, setting a record for the longest hitless streak, most no-hit innings to start a big league career as a starter since 1900. So basically, baseball as we know it, even if that's not technically the start of Major League Baseball, but the sport as we know it in this format. So impressive stuff for Miz. 6 innings for him, just the 1 hit, 2 earned runs, a walk, 6 strikeouts, and a homer. I'm not going to go over this outing too much because he made another start to bookend, I guess, this week-long stretch of games here, these 2 series, and we can kind of package some of our thoughts on how he's performed into that section. As for the Brewers offense, Christian Yelich, who we've talked about how hot he's been for the better part of about 4 weeks now here, drove in 8 of the Brewers' 17 runs, and he did it without hitting a home run. He went 4 for 6 and hit 2 bases-loaded doubles that were responsible for 6 of those 8 runs driven in, so a big night for him. Big night for a couple of hitters when you score 17 runs, but we're not going to recap the whole song and dance. Final note from this one, Jake Bauers giving up his first runs of the season. as he came on in the ninth to try to close this one down. He gave up 4 runs total, but 2 of them were earned. Joey Ortiz promptly spiked a ball into the ground for Sal Frelick, who was making his first professional appearance as a first baseman in that final inning because Bowers came in to pitch and they took the DH out and all the maneuvering that comes with that. So a little bit of a tough situation for Sal Frelick right away after coming into the game at first base. Probably one of the shorter first basemen that you're ever going to see play in a professional baseball game, but he was out there. I think he was using the community glove. Matt Erickson's got a first base mitt that he's got broken in, so that's what he was using out there. Game 2, the Brewers winning 9-0, shutting out the Twins in this one. Again, a lot of offense. We're not going to run through the entire thing, but 2 runs in each of the first 2 innings for the Brewers, so that gave them 4. Then they pulled away even further late with 3 runs in the 8th and then a couple more in the 9th. Meanwhile, Jose Quintana, a very Jose Quintana line, 6 innings, 3 hits, 4 walks, and 1 strikeout. A very Jose Quintana line. This is kind of what I think you're going to get sometimes when you have a guy who essentially is making his money in the bigs at this point by nibbling. And, this is going to be, I think, a side effect of it, even when he's keeping runs off the board. Sometimes it might be better for him to miss outside the strike zone than over the heart of the plate. That said, I don't think 4 walks is really what anyone's hoping for. The walks on the whole are probably higher than what anybody is hoping for. And we've talked about how just he's not going to sustain the kind of production that he's had. Even after that last regression start, he was still another regression start away from the results really starting to catch up more to where the peripherals have been at. But we do kind of know that this is his brand of how he's going to pitch, so I don't think there's anything too shocking about this outing. But the result's certainly there as the Brewers shut out the Twins in Game 2. Game 3, another 9-run showing for the Brewers offense, but Minnesota almost completing the comeback. So the Brewers scored in each of the first 4 innings. In this one, Quinn Priester had his first rough start in quite a while. 3 1/3 for him. Only 3 runs allowed, 2 homers. So kind of surprising that he was actually able to make it out without more damage, but a lot of traffic. The Twins were hitting him quite a bit harder than even that 3 earned runs would indicate. 9 hits in those 3 1/3 innings. He did have 4 strikeouts, no walks, but Minnesota was on that sinker pretty good. So Pat Murphy not wasting any time going to his bullpen to try to finish this one off. Rhys Hoskins and Christian Yelich did lead a comeback, though, so Quinn Priester relinquished an early lead for the Brewers, but Hoskins and Yelich leading a comeback in the 2nd and 3rd innings, doing some damage. Bryce Terang adding an insurance homer with a 3-run shot in the 5th, and that ended up looking pretty big as this game went along. Sal Frelick also added another run as well with an RBI to get the Brewers to 9, and they would need every single one of those runs. Abner Uribe gave up a homer to Byron Buxton in the 6th. That made it 9-4, and really where this game turned, you don't like to pin it all on one guy, but it really was DL Hall coming in, presumably to, if not cover the final 3 innings, at least eat up 2 there and get this one to the finish line. Instead, he entered in the 7th with that 9-4 lead, and he went sharp. Ground out for the only out he recorded, then walk, single, walk. Did not look good. That forced Nick Mears to come in, inherit a jam. He was able to get out of it, and then Jared Koenig and Trevor McGill taking this one home. Koenig got into some trouble of his own as well, though, but the Brewers hanging on by a final of 9-8. DL Hall now, this is really one of my takeaways from not only from this game, but it was emblematic of kind of how he's looked on the whole so far in a lot of his appearances. He only has 1 more strikeout than he has walks. He's got 10 strikeouts and 9 walks. That's not a good strikeout rate to begin with, and obviously not a good walk rate. I mean, we've talked about this before. It's, to me, it's just still like the swings don't look uncomfortable. Like his stuff is just not, it's not really doing anything. And I still think on paper, a lot of the secondaries look good. The cutter is interesting because I like a lot of the characteristics on the cutter, but depending on which stuff model you want to go with, there's some that think it's an okay pitch, and then there's some that really do not like it at all. But it is a little disappointing to see that even with all the work you can tell he's putting into trying to further develop his arsenal and sequence better, like you can tell that he's making strides there, I think, but just the command and the way that the stuff is playing, it's not progressing in his second season with the Brewers, and there's still a lot of time left for that to change. But for right now, I think that's still pretty disappointing to see.
Yeah, it's definitely disappointing to see. And even if you look back to, he's in a pen role now. So I'm not even talking about him as a starter in the minors or anything along those lines. Like, we saw him in a bullpen role in Baltimore, and his stuff was a lot better than it is currently. And I know they're still kind of going out there and asking him to give, in some cases, 2, 3, maybe even 4 innings if things are going well. But it's just hard to fathom how somebody his age has completely lost a lot of his, especially the fastball. I mean, he's lost the fastball. The fastball was probably never an 80 grade pitch like it was scouted as by some websites and some scouts, but it was probably a borderline plus pitch at times during his minor league career and in the bullpen with the Orioles. And it's not right now. It's not all that close. And we've talked about it, as Jack mentioned. We've talked about the cutter and now even some two seams and how that can help, but it's just, it looks like a comfortable at bat for hitters. Like you said, there's no bad swings. There's really no takes on pitches that are hittable. They are just very, very comfortable against him in the box right now. And that's how you end up with a pretty much even strikeout to walk ratio on the whole. It's just, nothing is getting hitters off balance. Nothing is keeping them. You don't want hitters on the attack, and they are clearly comfortably on the attack against Hall right now. And it's just, it's hard for me to understand. And I don't know, Jack, did we ever get true clarification on if he had the knee cleaned up in the offseason? I know we talked about it a bunch of times, and I don't know if we ever did he ever clarify if he actually had that cleaned up? Because right now, that's the only thing I can think of as to why somebody his age would have totally lost the velocity that he had on his fastball going backwards.
Yeah, I still haven't gotten a definitive answer from anybody, but like he keeps saying that he feels way better than he did for much of last year. So, and he still seems to think the velocity is going to come back at some point, and like he likes that he's got all these other pitches now to really tie it together, which I agree. Like I still don't think if you look at his arsenal on the whole, especially now that he's got some of these other pitches and he's only throwing the four seamer like 35 or so
Mm-hmm.
percent of the time, like that's very low four seam fastball usage, and that's probably where it needs to be now with how that pitch grades out. Like I think everything that he's trying to do, it's the right stuff.
Yeah.
And the one thing I will say is like the fastball actually has gotten more whiffs so far this year. Now, when I've seen those whiffs, it still they look like very comfortable swings and guys are just missing it, but that could still be, some of these other pitches kind of factoring in now. You're
Right.
seeing different shapes and now, which is kind of what we've been hoping for. Like now that he's got the other shapes, and if he uses the main fastball really strategically, now you can get some of those whiffs because of the sequence that you're going through and the counts you're using it in, the pitches you're using it off of, when in the at bat you're using it, all these different things. So maybe we're seeing that a little bit, but they still look like comfortable swings where they're just missing it. And yeah, I mean it's just it's not getting better, I think, is what's the concerning part.
Yeah.
Even for all the work he does seem to be putting into it. And like I just speculated on it last week, I think it was. Like if you're looking for someone who they maybe end up using as a surprise trade candidate from the active roster, just kind of knowing where the situation is at, and again, it's me speculating. I don't have any inside info on this, but he's still not looking remotely close to the guy that the Brewers seem to think they were getting. So is he someone they would maybe be comfortable moving on from if they think that he can be part of a package that gives them a good return that helps them now? Maybe he is, but yeah, it is still strange to just see that it's just not it's not going anywhere. It just seems like he's kind of stuck in place.
Yeah. And I think the other part of the equation here is that they were able to preserve his option year last year. And that becomes an option this year, but I think they're also probably hoping to preserve it this year if possible as well. And now that you're getting somewhat deep into the season, I just wonder as we look forward if a guy like Chad Patrick might take that type of long relief role from a guy like DL Hall, and Hall be the one who ends up getting optioned if things just aren't continuing to get any better like they haven't been so far. So we'll have to see. I mean, still a little time before they have to make that decision, and we'll talk about some injury stuff later. So I'll leave some of that for then, but it's getting tough to kind of envision the role for him, and the fact that I don't know that Murph is going to trust him much. And unlike Ashby, I think this is a little more warranted. If you don't trust DL Hall in this moment, like there's plenty of reason to not trust him, just given the command, the stuff not playing super great, the swings, it does get kind of hard to envision a good role for him. And with the way the Brewers manage their starting rotation, which is to be pretty aggressive and not let them see the order 3 times too often, and just generally not super long starts. We've talked about it before. You have to trust all your relievers, and I think you're at a point where I can understand if you don't trust all of your relievers, unlike some of the other times we've talked about this. So it will be interesting to see how they handle this moving forward, because it feels to me like he might be getting a little closer to the end of his rope on an active roster spot.
Yeah, we'll revisit that too when we talk about some rotation updates and kind of what that mix might look like in a little bit. For now, we'll move on to the Pirates series. The Brewers returning home for a 3-game set against Pittsburgh, and they won 2 of those 3. They dropped game 1, close game, 5-4 final in Pittsburgh's favor. And Chad Patrick, who you just mentioned, now a guy who's a little bit in flux, probably 3rd straight subpar outing for him. Did cover 5 innings, but he gave up 9 hits, 4 earned runs, a walk, and a homer. So this is an interesting start. He had 9 strikeouts. The Brewers, I don't have it in the notes, but I believe they struck out 16 guys in this game.
Yep.
And they still allowed plenty of hits too. So for Patrick specifically, it was either it was a swing and a miss or the ball was getting hit hard. And that's kind of how you end up with 9 Ks, but 9 hits allowed, and then the 4 earned as well, obviously. So not a great outing for him. The Brewers, however, did battle back. They eventually tied it at 4-4. Christian Yelich hitting another home run in the bottom of the 5th, 2-run shot, and that's what got it to 4-4. Nick Mears comes in for the 6th, though, and pretty promptly gives up what would end up being that game-winning triple to Isaac Kiner-Falefa in that 6th inning. Pat Murphy, when he was talking about this game post-game, just talked about how there were a lot of little things that did not go in the Brewers' favor. Some of it luck-based, some of it self-inflicted. So we'll run through a couple of those moments. On the whole, first of all, the Brewers in this game had a .290 expected batting average. The Pirates had a .214 expected batting average. Yet Pittsburgh out-hit the Brewers and outscored the Brewers. That Kiner-Falefa double or triple, that I mentioned a couple seconds ago, that thing had a .280 expected batting average. It was kind of a blooper that he was able to tuck down that right field line, and then Sal Frelick didn't play it great either off the wall, which is a little bit out of the ordinary for him. But a couple of more self-inflicted moments from the Brewers. Murphy didn't mention this one, but this is one that still jumps out to me in the 5th inning when Jackson Chourio, the Brewers had 2 on and nobody out. Now, this is part of ultimately the same inning where the Brewers would tie it because Yelich hit that home run, but you had the potential for a bigger inning here if this didn't happen. So there's 2 things to point out here. I think number 1 is like Joey Ortiz getting double off there. That's the one that's going to jump out to people. But the other thing that jumped out to me as well was you had Shugart was on the mound for Pittsburgh, and he had gone single and hit by pitch to start this inning. He hit Sal Frelick. Every pitch for that at bat, just really not close to the strike zone. And then when he pitched to Chourio, not close to the strike zone. And yet here's Jackson Chourio up here hacking at 2 pitches that were like coming for his chest, back-to-back pitches that were coming for his chest. He swung and missed at the first one, and then he understandably just hit a squibber back to the mound on the second one because that's really all you can do if you make contact with that pitch. But it's one of those moments where we've talked plenty about the aggression from Jackson Chourio and how it's got to be better. But this situation, especially, like, what are you doing here? Knowing that knowing what the situation is, knowing this is a guy who's not throwing a lot of strikes. Why in this situation specifically too are you being so overly aggressive and your eyes are lighting up at the first pitch that you think maybe is going to hold the plate? Like that's just got to be better. That's a terrible at bat, and the potential for Jackson Churio and what both of us I think he's going to turn into when it's all said and done, that hasn't changed. But it has been a little bit disappointing to see him. I wouldn't say not keep progressing, because like development's not linear. I get it, and there's going to be constant adjustments and things that are changing. But to seemingly see him last year get better at not chasing as many pitches, get better at hitting the pitch low and away. Like he went from being helpless against that pitch to crushing it now this year. And that's a different those are different pitches than the ones I'm talking about here, but just for a larger point. To see him seemingly take steps back in areas that he improved in down the stretch last year, that's not what I saw coming, and that's what's been pretty disappointing from him this year, even though he's still been a perfectly solid player overall. If you look at the slash line and reasonable defense for the most part in center field, league average offense, like that, it's all okay, and I still think it's going to end up being okay. But the fact that he's taken a step back in some of these areas that he seemingly had figured out, and that it seems to just, I don't think it's that much that pitchers are pitching him differently either. It's like he's gone back to chasing pitches that he was not chasing late last year, and that's frustrating to see.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I mean, it's not super uncommon. Obviously, there is a thing called a sophomore slump for a reason. This does happen to second year players. Things like this do happen. But like you said, I think the most surprising and disappointing part is definitely that he has gone. There were weaknesses early last year that we saw corrected, and then now he's come back and they're arguably worse than they were at the beginning of last year in some of these categories. And since May 22nd, I mean, he's been a good hitter. He's got a 120 WRC plus in that time. Like he's striking out at a 17% clip. Like he's getting the ball in play. He's hitting it pretty hard. He's having good production in that time. But you're still it's a 6% walk rate, which is, by the way, much higher than it was in going into that time. But it's still just, when you watch it, and I couldn't find the chase rate. I was trying to pull it up here, but like it doesn't feel like it's really improving in that regard. And like you said, I think this is a thing that I used to, you would see with like Willy Adames at times too, where a pitcher's struggling. And I don't know if it's maybe a case of a hitter going up there and thinking like, okay, this guy wants to get back in the zone, so I'm going to just jump on it when he does. And that gets you into this mode of being too aggressive, where you are just anticipating a pitch being in the zone and it doesn't actually end up happening. I wonder if that might be the case on some of these for Churio, where he's just so convinced that this guy's going to give him a cookie that he just goes up and like, I'm crushing this ball. And when you do that, you usually start your swing early. You usually can't really stop yourself from, like, when you make up your mind to swing, you're going to swing. So I wonder if some of those things are happening. I also wonder, just with a young player who at times probably feels like he's being relied on for big offense, if there's some pressure up there where he's like, I need to get the big hit here. I need to do these things. But again, a lot of those things were true in the second half of last year, especially because Yelich was out during that time, and we weren't seeing this. So it's very interesting to me. I don't know. Again, my guess would be that this is more of it is a mental thing. When you go up there with these types of things, I doubt it's that he can't see pitches. I think he's putting himself in weird positions where he's struggling to make decisions in a timely manner. And it's not, again, uncommon for young players. I don't think it's definitely not something that I worry about long term. Like you said, nothing has changed in what I think he's going to be in the long term, but he can be one of the most frustrating at bats for the Brewers to watch right now, if not the most. And that is not what I anticipated coming into the year. I gave a bunch of reasons why I think that could be the case, but in the end, I don't know what's causing it, but it can be frustrating in this moment in particular. Like you said, this is a spot where you have to know better. And this is maybe something I would have expected from him early in his first season, not so much in year two.
The last thing I want to say too is you mentioned like the walk rate's a little over 6% during kind of this stretch here now, and I really don't want it higher than that. Like he's still
Yeah.
so talented, and the hit tool is still so good. There's still so much explosiveness in the hands. I have seen him do it. He can get to just about any pitch when things are going right. He's that dynamic and that talented. So I'm okay if he chases quite a few more pitches than the typical hitter, than the league average hitter. I would prefer that because it means that he's going out and he's trying to use his skill set and his tools to do damage because that's what he's capable of. I don't want him to be a guy who's walking, 11% of the time because he's also swinging at fewer pitches he can do damage with. Like that's not what I want. But there's a line. He cannot have one of the worst chase rates in baseball. That's just not going to play. So that's kind of the distinction there. But yeah, I mean, you pulled up the numbers. It's largely been pretty solid lately. But then you still see these at bats like this, and like that's where these problems can really kind of stick out, not just for the player, but also in the context of a game, like it did in this situation. Um, Another situation for the Brewers late in this one, Jake Bauers missing a walk-off homer by several feet. He hooked it on the wrong side of the foul line in right field. And then Caleb Durbin, 2 pitches later, I believe it was, tried to steal second, had the base stolen, but then overslid the base and he was tagged out. And then Jake Bauers ended up walking too, so Caleb Durbin would have had second base anyway. So just kind of one of those little moments too where a game of inches and the Brewers did something that gave a couple of those inches to the Pirates, who ended up hanging on to win this one.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about how this team has been a lot better in that area for, I mean, really this whole hot stretch. They've been a lot better in doing the little things and also having some breaks go your way. And I think sometimes something like sliding through a base or oversliding it's something you can control, but it also is one of those things that just sometimes happens. And it's funny to me, just a quick tangent, like it took so long for them to review it, and Durbin was out like 5 times on that tag. He tagged him and his arm, like before he even overslid the base, his hand had left the base and his leg wasn't on the base either. So he was out there. They tagged him while he was off the base, and then he tried to dive back and they tagged him before he got back. It took him like 2.5 minutes to review it. I was like, am I missing something? But just generally, I think they didn't do some of the small things, and they also had some bad breaks. And like you said, Bauers, I mean, you're talking a 10th, not even a 100th of a second later on that pitch, and the Brewers win the game and it's over. And that's just, it is a game of inches. It's a game of even smaller than that on swing timing and stuff. Like you can be that close to hitting a walk-off homer, and then it can be, that's the game and it's over. So it we'll get to it in game 3 as well, where the Brewers had a lot of the game of inches, small things go their way in one inning, and it helped them win a game. So it's just one of those baseball things. I don't think too much of it, other than probably the Churio and Ortiz mistakes in that particular at bat. Were super like Brewers induced more than just baseball type of things. So just kind of the way it goes sometimes.
Game 2, the Brewers once again getting back in the win column, 9 runs for them again. Brewers 9, Pirates 3. Joey Ortiz, and really the left side of the infield were the stories in this one. Ortiz entered the evening with 2 home runs on the season. He then homered in consecutive innings, so 2 for the night in 2 straight innings. Part of a offensive surge that he's been on. Caleb Durbin also homered. He and Ortiz went back to back. Freddie Peralta, meanwhile, ran into some trouble in the second inning, and Caleb Durbin was kind of part of that as well. There was a ball that got past him at third. I'm not going to say routine play, but I think probably one that he should have had. It was like a 75-mile-an-hour one-hopper, and the break on it was not great, so it passed him. He didn't get to it, wasn't able to range far enough. And that was the first of 3 straight base runners to reach low to the bases with nobody out. Caleb Durbin, though, then did make a play on a soft roller to third, and he was able to fire home quickly enough. And that is one thing that I think has been an issue for him at times, like the quickness. It looks like he has not been moving quickly enough at third, but he did it on that play, which was, again, not a hard hit ball. So you got to have some urgency there if you're trying to get that out of the plate, which he did. So that's the first out for Freddie. He strikes out Kiner Falefa, and then Isaac Collins, our jumps king. making a nice sliding catch. We won't talk about what he did later in the series, but a nice sliding catch there that got Peralta out of the inning. After that, he cruised through the first 5 innings, but then he came back out for the 6th and went single homer, and that brought his day to a pretty abrupt end. So 5 innings for him, scattered 7 hits, 3 earned runs, 8 Ks, and then that home run, but threw the ball a little better for a good chunk of that outing than that final line would indicate. Milwaukee comfortably winning this one 9-3. Aaron Ashby, too, who we mentioned before, finished this one off. And I thought it was an interesting outing for him because, he was able to cover the 3 innings. He struck out 6. But he had a lot of deep counts in those first 2 innings. Like, you could tell the command and the control were not very good. He wasn't walking guys per se. He was getting the outs, but like a lot of non-competitive locations, extending those counts a little more than they needed to. I thought his best inning was when he came out for that 3rd inning and he went, I believe it was strikeout. Somebody reached. He was either a single or a walk, but then 2 more strikeouts. I thought that was, and it was his cleanest inning by pitch count as well. So kind of what the Aaron Ashby experience is like a little bit, but the stuff has been very good. I know you tweeted something out about how good the numbers have been for him since he came back to the big leagues last year in that exclusive pen role. Something interesting that he kind of said post-game about this outing too. He said that there were times that he felt like he was trying to be too gross with some of his stuff, and as opposed to just letting it rip like right over the plate and just let the stuff do its thing. So seemed to be something he cleaned up a little bit in that final inning, but that's interesting to hear because I do wonder now if that's something that maybe he falls into sometimes with as much movement as he has. Sometimes you do need to simplify it to just get it over the plate and let it do what it's supposed to do. But can't deny what the numbers are for him now for a pretty good stretch. I do think with like some of those misses, you could kind of see like maybe why Pat Murphy hasn't always trusted him more, but I still think he needs to be getting more work too than he has so far. So we'll see if this is the outing that kind of pushes him over that hump a little bit, and maybe he gets to see more of the actual leverage long relief that Murphy keeps talking about instead of more like the garbage time situations that he's been asked to eat up so far.
Yeah, it's funny because you can see it when you watch, like you get why there might be a lack of trust in some cases. And then you look at the stats that I tweeted, I have to bring them up because they're hilarious to me for a guy who's struggling to get important innings. It's incredible. 35 and a third innings since he came back in this pen role last August. He has a 34.1 strikeout rate, a 3.7 walk rate, which that lines up with the eye test not at all. Like you would never guess that he has a 3.7% walk rate. His ground ball rate is 59%, which that lines up. Like he always gets grounders. That's always been a big part of it. And then he has a 1.27 ERA, a 1.4 FIP, and a WHIP of 0.85. And like just in terms of where he ranks among relievers with at least 20 innings, he's 4th in ERA, 2nd in FIP, 6th in strikeout to walk ratio. Ground ball rate's 11th, and then his WHIP is 14th. And that's 281 relievers who have thrown at least 20 innings in that stretch. But I get it because when you watch him, you're not comfortable. Like I don't think I've ever had anybody that I can think of that lined up as little on the eye test and the stats in like a positive for the stats. Like you see it where guys look nasty and they have bad stats, but you don't see guys who just look like they're not performing well. When you watch them, you feel like he's on the ropes. You feel like things aren't going well. And when you look at the stats, like it's legitimately been one of the best relievers in baseball since he became a reliever last year in terms of just the pure stats. So it's just very interesting to me. I don't really know how to take it really and where it goes from here. But like you said, I feel like he at this point he's earned the chance, even if it can feel kind of hard to trust him in those moments. Because the production is just it's hard to argue with. It's not even a matter of like the ball is hit somewhat hard off of him. That's the one thing that he doesn't look great in when you look at these stats, but they're often like pounded into the ground. So it's hit hard, but it's hit 2 hoppers in the infield, and they might end up being hits, and there are some low liners and everything else, but it's just I can't think of anyone that's ever been like this, where you just see like genuinely unbelievable stats. Like, again, one of the best relievers in baseball since he's been back in that role. But when you watch him, you don't feel comfortable. And I can't think of times that I've ever had that. But I don't envy Murph in that scenario, because I do get it to an extent. But just to circle it back, like, I feel like at some point you just have to accept that he is getting this done and he deserves to get the opportunities. And we talked about Hall, like, that's kind of been your more of your leverage long relief guy. I don't get how you could trust Hall over Ashby at this point under any circumstances. So I think it has to be Ashby when you're going to those types of opportunities. And I even think, Ashby can be the guy who's capable of being a leverage reliever just in a normal role as well. If you're shorthanded in the pen, or you need an eighth inning because Abner's been pitching a bunch, and something like whatever you want, like Ashby's capable of filling in that role better than a guy like Hall too. So it's been very fun to watch him, but it is one of those outings where it's like, oh yeah, he just threw a pitch that missed by like 2 feet, and then he threw a curveball that was disgusting, and it got a terrible swing or it got a terrible take, and it's kind of all over the place. But it's just getting very hard to argue with those results in the end, I think.
Let's go to game 3 here, which was the main draw of this 3-game series. Jacob Misiorowski against Paul Skeens, a much anticipated pitching matchup, and Misiorowski came out on top. Before we talk about him, let's just talk about how the Brewers got to Paul Skeens, kind of circling back to what you alluded to about how a lot of the little things that went against the Brewers in game 1 essentially came back around. I would argue a little bit in game 2, but then for sure in game 3 here in another close game. They basically dinked and dunked their way to 4 runs against Paul Skeens, which all technically counted as 4 earned runs, but the Pirates defense didn't give them a whole lot of help. When Eric Haas hit that double off of Skeens, as soon as he hit that thing in the air, and I saw the way that O'Neal Cruz was going toward it, like, sometimes it's hard to tell with these, like, the big guys, because they have such long strides where it might look like they're not trying to go after it. So I'm not going to question the effort level, but you could see just by the route he was taking right off the bat, I was like, he's not going to catch this thing. And sure enough, drops under the glove, bounces past him. Eric Haas gets a hustle double out of it. A couple plays later, the Brewers coming in to score a run. Caleb Durbin was already sliding into the plate by the time that Nick Gonzalez decided to uncork a wild throw to the plate. So again, not great defense from Pittsburgh there. But none of these plays scored as errors, so it's all earned runs off of Paul Skeens. That second inning would be the only scoring for the Brewers all day. Pat Murphy pretty openly acknowledging postgame that actually his offense was pretty bad that day, and they just kind of lucked into 4 runs against Paul Skeens, which that's also baseball, and it gave Jacob Misiorowski the opportunity to end up with the better outing. I think even if you factor in like the luck and some of this stuff, I still think Miz pitched better than Skeens did either way. So let's look into his outing a little bit. 5 innings for him, 2 hits, 2 walks, 8 strikeouts. The 8 strikeouts are what jump out to me. The 5 innings, like he's on an innings limit, so the Brewers are going to try to manage this stuff, and I think this was the right situation where, you've got a lead. Things are looking pretty comfortable at that point. You're up 4-0. This is the day where, hey, let's just get him out of there. We'll save some bullets. Another note, too, is he's also now pitching on 4 days rest for the first time in his career. When you're in AAA, you have 1 off day every week. So guys are used to being on the every 5 days rotation. Murph did mention that he had never thrown, I believe, more than 75 pitches while pitching on 4 days rest, or less rest than he's used to in most of his starts in the minor leagues. So that kind of went into the decision as well. But as far as the actual performance here, what stood out to me is this was a lot more like what I thought we were going to see in his first 2 outings, which was a lot of fastballs and guys just whiffing hopelessly at them. We didn't see it in those first 2 outings. He used some of the secondaries a little more, especially the slider, cutter pitch, whatever you want to call it. But this was really the first day, I think, where he had his best fastball. Like, we know it's an 80 grade fastball. You could already see that in his first 2 starts. Guys still weren't squaring it up in those first 2 starts. But like in the Twins start in particular, not a lot of whiffs. His first start, quite a few whiffs still. He was still around like 30% in his first start, but I think he only had like 1 or 2 whiffs, with the fastball against the Twins. This, though, is what his fastball looks like when everything is firing on all cylinders. He was commanding it really well. Pretty much all the fastballs were in the upper third of the strike zone with the extension and with the move. He had an extra inch of vert on it in this start too. He just said he felt really good mechanically, so it was coming out really well. But the extra vert at the top of the zone with the extension, with the velocity, like all of that stuff, that's what that fastball looks like when everything is where it can be. Like this is the 100th percentile version of Jacob Misiorowski's 80 grade fastball, where all of this stuff is coming together, and like he probably could have gotten through this start throwing 80% fastballs instead of 64, and they probably still wouldn't have hit it.
Yeah, it was very fun to watch, and like you said, this is basically the exact, I mean, the best version of the fastball that you're going to get. And I mean, I was looking at some of the data on it. It had like a negative 3.6 vertical approach angle, average that for this game. Like, I mean, you're throwing 19 pitches, 100 or higher with some of the, with the biggest 100th percentile extension in the big leagues right now. And it's also got carry on it from a low release height. And like you said, an extra inch of carry in this particular game. I mean, when he has that going, I think you're right. I think he could probably throw 90% of them and still be able to just get through the game. He might, give up one homer or give up a run or something in that scenario. Somebody would run into one, but I don't think there'd be much damage done against it. I don't think they'd eventually, start to square it up or whatever. That type of fastball is just going to play no matter what you're doing. And especially if you're getting it up at the top of the zone like he was. And yeah, it was fun. It's interesting. We had an Eric Haas start behind the plate, and he called more fastballs than Contreras had been. And that is usually the exact
This is the guy I would do it for.
Oh,
like if it's good that day,
agree.
This is the guy I would do it for. Like seriously, if he's got this version of it and he's spotting it up in the zone, call 80% fastballs. It's probably going to work.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's just funny when you look at it in that sense. But like, it's more than anything, even beyond the fastball and everything else. I remain very impressed by his ability to not just, he gets in a little trouble and there's no panic. There's nothing. Like, he gets into a first and second, nobody out situation. He's finally starting to look like the velo's down a little bit in that inning to start the inning. He's kind of 97, 98. And he gets a ground ball double play on a pitch that he basically dotted the low and outside corner on and got him to kind of try and pull an outside pitch and got a routine 6-4-3 double play. And then he goes and he just chucks 102 past O'Neal Cruz twice in a row. And that's how you get through it. Like, it's just been impressive to me to watch him deal with some bumps in the road, even though there haven't been many. But he also hasn't let them become bigger, and that's why it feels like he hasn't had as many bumps in the road, because every time there's been any opportunity for something to go south, he's basically just cut it off, other than the 7th inning of his game that he had a no-hitter at that point and a perfect game heading into it, where he gives up the 2-run homer. I mean, there's been nothing that he's let get to him at all, and it's been incredibly impressive to watch. Even, as somebody who had all this belief that he actually could start this year, like, there's no chance I saw any of this coming. Like that, I thought by now, 3 starts in, you would have had at least one, not just bad start, but I honestly probably would have expected one blow up in the first 3 starts, just because that's a ton of pressure. And then he goes in, and we talked about it, but it's a 42,000 in attendance sellout on a Wednesday day game because he's facing Paul Skeens, and it's the talk of baseball. And he goes out and he does this. Like, it's very impressive. That's not easy to do. I mean, more than anything, it's impressive just from a mental standpoint. And I know Murph talked after the game and mentioned that, like, hey, I talked to him before the game and said, hey, it's not the Miz show, right? We're trying to win games. We're trying to go out and compete. And he shows emotion on the mound. So there's a little Miz show going on at times after innings, but like, he just handled it so well. And it was very impressive. I really don't have too many more words for it, because I just can't really believe it. I really can't, how good it's gone the first 3 starts. It's hard for me to really wrap my head around still.
I think what's been striking for me is Not just the number of strikes he's the number of strikes he's throwing. So the walks are still a little high, which I think they just always will be.
Yeah.
And my guess is we're still going to see pretty quickly here a start where he walks like 6 guys. Like it's going to happen. It happened very recently in Nashville before he got the call. He's going to run into it at some point, and he's going to face even like way bigger tests even than he's already faced so far, and he's eventually going to fail some of them because that's just how this works. But in terms of how many pitches he's actually thrown in the strike zone so far, he's thrown more pitches in the zone than the MLB average through these 3 starts. In this start, almost 60% of his pitches were in the strike zone. And not only are they in the strike zone, they're quality strikes. Like he's dotting the corners with fastballs. He's in this start in particular, he dotted both corners like 5 times with sliders. Like he had one sequence where it was fastball on the dot and then slider on the dot outside and then comeback slider on the dot inside. It was, good morning, good afternoon, good night, that exact sequence. Like those are the kinds of things that I wasn't really expecting. Not just the stuff, like we all knew the stuff would play. We all knew if he was in the zone enough, he'd be okay. But to have both of those things and then the pitches that are in the zone, like that many of them being on the corners like that, like that's what's also stood out to me through these first couple outings. And this one in particular, even for as good as the first 2 were, I think he threw the ball way better in this outing than he did in either of those first 2. And I don't think it's even close in terms of like just from a process standpoint, the quality of pitches that he was making in this one.
Yeah. And that's pretty impressive because they were pretty solid in the first 2 as well. And but I agree. This was his best start. And I mean, he didn't carry a no-hitter into or past the 5th, which he did in both of the other 2 outings, but this was his best start. The command of everything. I mean, I think you were talking about the Tommy Pham at bat, which was fastball outside corner and then 2 sliders that both clipped the outside corner. And it was 3 pitches. See you later. Pham, of course, upset because Pham's always upset, but they were all strikes. And just even the O'Neill Cruz at bat, I talked about the 102. He shook to the second fastball, the strikeout pitch. He shook to that. I think we don't know, but my guess is that Haas thought they could probably get a changeup in there because he just showed 102 inside and he thought Cruz was going to probably start early. If I were going to guess, that's probably what I would have called in that spot because he thought Cruz was going to try and get the head out and try and catch up to 102. Miz shook it off. You could see it on the replay. And then he still just blew 102. And that was a perfectly placed pitch too. That literally would have clipped the corner. It would have been a called strike if he didn't swing. I mean, just stuff like that, like the moxie to even be willing to shake off in that spot and know that like I have the conviction to throw this pitch and I'm going to bring as much as I can on this pitch. I guess that leads into one other thing I want to talk about is that on that note, I think we saw more of what maybe the sustainable path is for Miz in the second half of the start, where he was sitting more in like that 98 range on the fastball. And then he gets a big matchup with a guy like Cruz and he brings 102 a couple times. Like, I'm not sure he'll be able to, I mean, he can, but I think sitting in that upper 90s versus sitting in triple digits early in games might allow him over the course of his career to hold up over starts and for long starts and everything else. We talked about like Justin Verlander used to do this where he would sit in the mid to upper 90s. And then if he needed it, he could bring triple digits in a big moment, whatever. Like, I wonder if he's going to kind of settle into that now that maybe some of the juice is wearing off on the debut and the big matchups and everything else. And this is what he looked more like in AAA, was sitting in the upper 90s. And then all of a sudden he could bring 102 when he needed it. And I think that's also just an evolution as a pitcher. I think early in his career in the minors, watching him as much as I did, you would see him early in games touching triple digits, sitting way up near 100 all the first 2-3 innings. And then by the 5th inning, you would see 94s, 95s on fastballs from him. And I think just kind of learning how to not save energy, but also just he's gotten stronger. He's developed his body and everything else. But like, just so much has gone into his improvement. It's pretty mind blowing. I just everything about this start was so encouraging because it just felt like he was it felt like he was due for the letdown, like going into it. And you even texted in the first, like, oh, this might be he immediately walks the first batter and you're like, oh, this might be the one. And then nope, it ends up being his best start. So eventually, like you said, there's going to be a blow up and there's going to be something that happens here where he just loses command in a game and struggles to get it back or whatever. Like that's going to be part of the Miz experience, probably for his career. That's just how people like him are going to operate at some level. But yeah, it's just been so fun to watch. I mean, the Twins game, I genuinely sat on my couch and was just laughing the whole time watching it because he was getting, I mean, the Willie Castro swing obviously got the most attention, but like just it's been so much better than I could have anticipated it being. So yeah, I'm just going in circles now, so we should move on.
We did get a question about kind of Miz's workload. So Andrew asked us, what do you think are the chances he gets shut down for the year before the end of the season due to an innings threshold that are sometimes set to preserve the health of young pitchers? I would guess that what's more likely is they're going to do kind of what they did in this start where they pull him, they're proactive with the hooks so that they can be in a position down the stretch where they don't need to shut him down. I think they're going to try to pace it out as best they can.
Yeah, maybe take advantage of the All-Star break and skip a start there. And that way you can, come back after the All-Star break and have him go fifth out of there. Just things like that you can take advantage of to try and limit the innings as the season goes along. Maybe you have a stretch where you have multiple off days and you can skip a start or push him back or whatever, like just to minimize it. But there hasn't really been a time, and Miz is a different level pitcher than even what Burns and Freddie and Woodruff were at the time they arrived in the big leagues. They obviously developed in the big leagues into very, very good pitchers. But when they first showed up, there wasn't really this thought of like, oh, these guys might have to have innings limits, and partially because they were out of the pen to begin with. But even when they just first started in the rotation, there wasn't really a ton of talk of that, but they did skip starts once in a while and they would do these things. I don't think they're going to, if they are in contention at the end of the season, I don't think they're going to be like, well, we set 140 is his limit and he's there, so we're just going to be done. I don't think it's going to be a Steven Strasburg rookie year type of situation, but I think they're going to do their best to avoid that having to even be a thought by skipping some starts, doing some things along those lines, shortening starts like Jack talked about, and finding a way to limit the even having to like have that thought cross their mind when it comes down to it at the end of the season.
Let's go to a couple injury updates really quickly. Start with Garrett Mitchell. This is a relevant one because we talked a lot last week about what's going to happen with Isaac Collins. And one of the things we said was, well, we don't need to think about it too much right now because you never know what could happen. And sure enough, something happened to Garrett Mitchell. He re-injured his surgically repaired shoulder from 2 years ago, diving back into first base last week while on his rehab assignment with AAA Nashville. He got imaging on it, and team doctor William Roche said that some of the anchors from that previous shoulder surgery were dislodged. He diagnosed him with a bony Bankert lesion, which basically means there's just not enough stability in that shoulder right now, and it extends to the bone structure in that shoulder as well. It's not just soft tissue stuff. So he recommended surgery, which Pat Murphy said would sideline him for 8 to 10 weeks. Mitchell flew to LA. Then he's getting a second opinion from Dr. Neil Elatrosh, who is the person who did, or the doctor, I should say, who did that last surgery on his shoulder. So he's familiar with that. But I would imagine he's going to be going under the knife here pretty soon. So again, we'll be out for the foreseeable future. Garrett Mitchell now has played in parts of 4 MLB seasons, and he still does not have 162 games under his belt.
Yeah, it's getting tough because he is also entering his first year of arbitration this next offseason, and they're not going to non-tender Garrett Mitchell unless some injury ends up, looking like it's career threatening or something along those lines. But it does start to make you wonder if there's even a path to, if they might be interested in moving him just for not even the value you might expect in terms of like, okay, at some point, can you just not trust that there's even room for him on the roster? Can you rely on him to be on your roster? And again, a lot of these are kind of dumb luck. It's not really something he has a ton of control over. It's unfortunate more than anything, but eventually, do they just move on and say, we can't rely on him to be part of our roster? We're constantly trying to fill his role after the fact when he gets hurt. And maybe they make a move for something less than they would have considered a year ago or 2 years ago when they really viewed him as probably a pillar of the team moving forward. So it'll be interesting to see how this offseason goes. I'm not saying that's going to happen, and he's not going to be non-tendered. That would shock me. But the other part of that is he's probably not getting much of a big raise because he hasn't played. So he's probably not going to be that much higher than what he's made so far on the minimum deal. But yeah, I wonder about his future with the team at this point. I think it's just getting tough for them to feel comfortable viewing him as somebody that they're going to have going into a season, because they never do.
Yeah, if I had to take a guess at how this ends up going in ARB, it's probably going to be a pretty quick player and team agree on a very modest
yeah,
raise, because, like, let's face it, he doesn't have much leverage here, and I'm sure, this is one of those situations where you could probably get a pretty quick agreement between these two sides without a ton of negotiating. Speaking of surgeries that will sideline people for 8 to 10 weeks, Brock Wilken, who injured his knee while celebrating the Biloxi Shuckers' first half championship, has officially been diagnosed with a dislocated left patella. He and the Brewers, according to Todd Rosiak earlier on Thursday, have agreed on a non-surgical route, but the recovery time is still 8 to 10 weeks. So I think I misspoke a couple seconds ago. It's not a surgery, but it's still, you're looking at the 8 to 10 week timeline that Mitchell will be looking at if he goes under the knife. So we're not going to see Brock Wilken in Biloxi either, which is an unfortunate disruption to his bounce back season.
Yes, very much so. And you have to feel terrible for the guy. He's had two pretty freak injuries now. We just talked about with Mitchell, similar situations, but even these would probably go beyond what Mitchell's had happen to him, with a fastball to the eye that ended up not even costing him that much time actually last year, but it ended up costing him his vision in some ways and his depth perception, and he wasn't able to hit much last year. And then he comes back, he's fixed that problem, having a great season, staying healthy. The Shuckers are playing fantastic baseball. They end up winning their first half title after a terrible first week or so of the season. And then he gets hurt celebrating that accomplishment. And honestly, you have to imagine he was getting pretty close to a AAA promotion as well at this point. So that may have been interrupted by this. And you just feel bad for the guy. Hopefully it doesn't cause any long-term issues. The concern with dislocated knees in any way are that they do end up kind of coming back in other ways, where it's easier to tear an ACL or an MCL after this because the knee's not as stable moving forward. And that really never stops. That's kind of like when you dislocate a shoulder, it's more prone to dislocating again, which is what we're kind of seeing with Mitchell. So, yeah, that's maybe the big concern here. I don't think it changes too much as long as he can stay healthy after it, but it sucks that it interrupts a very nice bounce back season, like you said.
Some better news: Blake Perkins had his rehab assignment transferred to Nashville on Thursday night, so moving up the chain for him. And then on the pitching side, this is where we get into some of the rotation developments. Brandon Woodruff threw a 60-pitch sim game on Monday. He's going to make a rehab start with the Sounds over the weekend. And then after that, if he makes it out of that one in good health, he's slated tentatively to return to the big league roster after that. Brewers haven't said anything about when he would pitch or any of that, but it sounds like his intention is that he feels he'll be ready to go, stretched out enough to come back after that. He's going to try to get up to 80 pitches in that rehab start, which would then put him on pace for next time out in the big leagues. Relatively few restrictions, not like a hard and fast he needs to come out at this point. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, the thing to watch is going to be the stuff. He talked multiple times on this homestand and then a little bit earlier as well about how he feels like, kind of like what we talked about when that injury first broke, that this could very well end up actually being the best route for both Brandon Woodruff and the Brewers, because it buys them a little more time to actually get the stuff to where it needs to be, because we've talked about it plenty. The stuff was not where it needed to be. by the end of those rehab starts, if he would have come back throwing 88 to 91, maybe touching 90, 92 sometimes, he probably would not have been all that effective. If he's throwing, averaging 92, touching some 95s, he's going to be okay. He said that the time off gave him a chance to take a step back, work on some mechanical stuff, work on some stuff in the weight room. He said in that 60 pitch sim game that he felt that the stuff in the command, it was all as good as it's been at any point in his rehab so far, which if that's the case, and he shows that in Nashville, I think we would all feel pretty good about plugging him back into a big league rotation and not expecting him to be the guy he was before, but a guy who can get results and give you some competitive outings as, like a number 4 kind of guy, maybe even a little more if the execution is really there of all the pitches that he's added to his arsenal as well. But the ultimate test in terms of what we expect from him is still going to be, what does he do in Nashville?
Yeah.
Obviously, it's still a low pressure rehab start, but he's got to at least show, I think, for both of us that there's that extra gear is in the tank, like he can get to it. I think that was part of the issue with his last outings as well, that he couldn't even, it wasn't just that we were seeing 88s and 89s. It was that we weren't seeing any of the 95s anymore. He could not get it up higher. And we'll see if that changes in his next outing. Mr. Cortez was pitching the other half of that sim game at American Family Field. He was throwing the other half innings while Woodruff was sitting for a little bit to simulate the up downs. He only threw 25 pitches, though. They're taking it slow with him. He's set to pitch again on Saturday. Maybe that'll be a sim game. Maybe it'll be a rehab assignment. We'll find out shortly. But he's also working his way back as well for a return after the All-Star break. Remember, he's going to have to go through a far more lengthy rehab process because he's only made 2 regular season starts. He's been out since early April. So you're still looking further down the line for him. But this does kind of bring back what we talked about earlier. How does this rotation mix look? What role does Chad Patrick play? You're almost certainly going to see if Brandon Woodruff comes back. Chad Patrick is optioned and Woodruff gets his rotation spot, and you go from there. But some moving pieces now, and decisions that had been delayed are now once again getting pretty close.
Yeah, and like we said last week, we thought that was coming with Garrett Mitchell, and now it's not. So in the end, we're still just going to have to see how this goes for a guy like Woodruff in this rehab appearance. I heard Jim Henderson doing an interview on MLB Network talking about it a little bit, and he said at one point that they were considering just having him throw another 80 pitch sim game in Milwaukee, and they were like,
yes.
They weren't sure if it was even worth it to send him there. They actually believe that he's more amped up just pitching in. It sounded like what he was saying was they believe he's more amped up, or he has a little more adrenaline just pitching in AmFam Field, even in a sim game, versus playing in front of actual fans and stuff in a AAA game where it just doesn't feel the same. I still have my questions on whether all of that is a real thing or not. I mean, I think adrenaline is real, and I think there will be a little bit extra in there when he gets back to the big leagues. But we've talked about it before. We won't go super deep into it, but I don't think there's a 5 mile per hour difference on your average fastball just because you're pitching in the big leagues versus AAA. That would be very hard for me to believe. But a couple ticks, yes, I would buy that. So if we're in the 90s, like Jack said, seeing 93, 94 even in AAA, I think I could buy then. Okay, yes, when he gets to the big leagues now, that goes up 1 or 2 miles per hour, and you start seeing some 95s and sitting in that 92 range. We can't see him in the upper 80s, sitting in the upper 80s. That's where I'm going to have a hard time believing that he's ready. But yeah, otherwise, they could have some decisions coming up soon. We'll have to see how Cortez progresses. That's, I think, if both of them come back, that's where it starts to get really interesting, because I do think right now it's going to be Patrick, whether that's him moving to a pen roll or more likely going to AAA to stay stretched out as a starter. But then it gets interesting with Cortez if he does return and what you do at that point, because that is where, if Woodruff is performing at that point, you could have a really weird, tough decision, and maybe that is where you see a Cortez or a Quintana flipped at the deadline for something else, just because you don't have other options to make that decision. But yeah, we'll see. Again, there's too much time for us to worry too much about it, I think, still.
Let's jump into some listener questions now. We'll start with Lucas, who asked about the Brewers' home and road splits. He kindly compiled their MLB ranks for us, home and on the road. I won't read all of them off, but basically at home, they are last in expected weighted on base average and 28th in actual weighted on base average. On the road, they are 5th in actual weighted on base average and 14th in expected weighted on base average. But even if you're going by the expected numbers, that's still a 24-point swing from 300 to 324. Worse at home, better on the road. So he asks, is there something going on here, or is this just random? We have a couple of thoughts here. Above all else, I would say randomness is the biggest driving factor here. But Spencer, I know you have a couple thoughts too, so I'll let you kind of go first and give your take.
Yeah, it was interesting because my first thought was to look at the pitching side of things and see if this is a case of like nobody's hitting at American Family Field, and the Brewers are way better way better at home pitching wise versus on the road. So I look up those numbers, and at first I'm starting to think, oh, there might be something to that because at home they're tied for 7th in ERA, or in 6th in FIP. On the road they're 23rd in ERA, 28th in FIP. So like, okay, maybe there's something going on at home. They pitch really well, but they can't hit. So is nobody able to hit at AmFam Field? And then they struggle on the road pitching wise, and that makes me wonder, like, really what's going on there? And then I realized I should probably take out those Yankees games at the beginning of the year because after that is a different story. I checked that out. And they go from 23rd in ERA to 7th in ERA on the road if you take out the Yankees series to start the season. And then they go from 28th in FIP to 11th in FIP. So that made me question whether there was any real validity to what I was looking at there. But I do think the last 2 years, the Brewers have been better on the road. And this year it's more drastic. But last year it was 108 WRC plus on the road and 100 at home. This year, there's a bigger difference, as Lucas laid out, and then even just in WRC Plus, there's a bigger difference. But those are the first 2 years since AmFam Field went to the new scoreboard, which is not actually bigger, but the screen part of the board is bigger. So it's not like there's actually moving pieces, or there are LED lights that are out there that are lower on the batter's eye now. And they also switched the lighting a few years ago as well, just in general for the stadium. And those are 2021, looking back, was one of the only other years that they did have worse home splits than road splits. But for the most part, if you go back in time, they've been much better at home than on the road. And that makes me wonder if there's something going on in terms of the lighting and potentially that scoreboard, if anything has changed with that, if that's causing something. I don't know. I mean, that's the only thing I could really come up with. I think the other part of this, and Jack has the numbers I'm not remembering right off the top of my head right now, but I think we were talking about it before we recorded, like there's an idea that AmFam Field is a hitter's park, and it's not. And it hasn't been for a while, and it's got this reputation as being, some people will even call it like a bandbox. They'll say it's like a hitter's park. And Jack, the park factors would put what, AmFam Field 26th? Is that what we said beforehand?
26th
Yeah.
out of the 28 stadiums that are on this list for the last 3 years.
Right. So it does not play like a hitter's ballpark in general. So I think there's some of that going on as well, where it's not shocking that just generally hitters don't hit as well at a park that doesn't play super well for offensive players. But that's kind of the only things we could come up, or I could come up with, Jack. I don't know if you had other theories, but I think for the most part, when I look at it, I wonder if maybe something changed a little bit with the lighting or the scoreboard and put some sort of thing. I'm not very convinced of that idea, but it's one of the only things I could come up with. And it does line up a little bit timeline wise with when they kind of flipped home and away stats. But otherwise, I think it's mostly just random. And then on top of that, it's a park that plays better for pitchers in general. So it's not super shocking that teams might not, and the Brewers might not hit super well there.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add on that. I think it's maybe a little bit of park factors, like you said. Other than that, though, largely random. Like Sometimes it legitimately just is you played better on the road, but there's no rhyme or reason for it. Just the days where you happen to be playing your better baseball came when you were not at home. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens, but it's not something that I would really pay too much attention to, even though I wouldn't be shocked if this is one of those stats that gets pumped out even more as the season goes along and if it stays as pronounced, but we'll see. Z asks about Christian Yelich's recent surge. He asked, it might be silly to speculate since health will be a key factor. But what do you guys expect for Yelich in the second half of the season? Does a slash line of 275, 352, 488, a 138 WRC plus, that's Brent Rooker's current line, seem reasonable? Without the ability to filter expected stats by date, it's hard to tell how much of his recent batting average is BABIP driven. His home run to fly ball ratio has been elite all season, though, so I believe in the power. So actually, you can sort expected stats by date if you use the search tool on Baseball Savant. You can filter everything out by dates. So Spencer was kind enough to go through and do that for us since May 22nd, which is the date in question that he's asking about. Since May 22nd, Yelich is batting 394 and slugging 670. His expected numbers are a 308 batting average and a 572 slugging. So a 477 weighted on base average against a 399 expected weighted on base average. And that's basically what you would expect. It's a combination of he's hitting the ball really hard, but he's also getting a little bit lucky as well. That's kind of what it takes to have a stretch where you're batting almost 400. His average exit velocity during this stretch is almost 94 miles an hour. His hard hit rate is 53%. I believe it's over 60% in June as well. So he's legitimately torching the ball right now. He's hot. He's not going to stay this hot, but we had talked even early in the season, like how long it took him to find the timing was in the moment a little bit concerning. I wasn't too worried. I'm trying to think back to what we said. I think it was mainly like it's something to watch, but we would still expect the production's going to go up quite a bit, and that's essentially what's happened here. Um, he's looking like himself though, and I think that's the bigger takeaway right now. So I don't know if I would quite say a 138 WRC plus, but if he's in like that 125 range the rest of the year, maybe I would say that's something that I can see. I think he's always going to be capped to some extent by the ground balls and the fact that he doesn't elevate more. I think the home runs are usually more the product of like when he is like perfectly on time, he's going to crush it. I think that's why he always runs the high home run to fly ball rates while also running the high ground ball rates. I had mentioned this to you even before we started. Like, I'm not sure if there's a guy who I've seen play for this team recently where the difference between when he's on time and when he's not on time is so dramatic. When he's on time, he looks like arguably the best hitter in baseball. When he's not on time, he looks almost unplayable at times, which, you know, timing is going to make the biggest difference for every single hitter. But to see it be this extreme as it's been for him throughout his time with the Brewers overall and within even this one season, it is pretty drastic. But yeah, I would say probably like that 120, 125, I would say would sound about right for me. I think he's probably going to end up finishing with season numbers pretty close to just where the season numbers are right now on a rate basis.
Yeah, I think that's definitely. I could see it being a little better than it is right now. I think there could be a decent finish to the season, but he's not going to continue what he's doing at this moment for sure. But it does. I mean, we talked about the timing thing, like you said. This we should note lines up exactly with when he went back to the toe tap, which we did talk about at that time as something we thought he should go back to because he had abandoned it about a month into the season, went back to his leg kick, and then he was back to the toe tap, and that's really when he started taking off. He had 2 homers in Pittsburgh the first game that he went back to it, and that's when he's just really gone from there. That was 522. So that must have been slightly after or slightly before because that's Memorial Day, I think. Either way, he has been very, very good since he went back to the toe tap. I think the timing is going to remain something. And I also think just with the timing in general, we talked about this at the time too. I think back to the 2020 season, the COVID season, his other season that he was coming off of a major injury that required surgery and required him to miss a lot of time where he wasn't even able to really have a fully normal offseason. Now, this offseason was more normal than that one was back in 2019, but it was still a long stretch without seeing major league pitching. And for a guy with such a timing based thing that we talked about, we never got to see what happened when he adjusted in 2020 because it was a 60-game season. And he finished stronger than he started that year. He started hitting for power. He had weird numbers for Christian Yelich. It was a low average, high power season. But we started seeing him figure it out towards the end of that season. And that kind of coincides with the timing of when he started figuring things out this year. Now we have the runway to let this season play out. We saw him hit extremely well before he went down last year. Like I could see it being more. I would not be surprised if it ends up looking more like Brent Rooker's line, like he talked about, that mid 130s WRC plus. Now, is that a reasonable expectation? Maybe not. But I think it is reasonably possible. It would not surprise me very much if we did see that, just kind of factoring everything in. Again, he's not going to stay this hot, but I do think he's going to continue to hit pretty well throughout the rest of the season. So either way, it's just good to see him performing. I mean, we're back up to, it might have fallen back below 800, but he's right around 800 OPS right now, considering where he was about a month ago. That's pretty hard to believe that he got up that quickly still. And it's nice to have a threat in the middle of the order again, because this offense needed somebody to be that type of guy to start figuring some things out, I think.
We should have taken this question a few minutes ago when we were talking about the rotation, but Will asked us, in a situation where everyone remains healthy, unlikely in parentheses, do you think Nestor Cortez will come back to the rotation, or will he move to a bullpen role, given that he's had experience as a pen guy in the past? I would say rotation. They're not going to pay, what is he making, like $8 million for a guy to pitch out of the bullpen? My guess is they wouldn't do that, although they were about to do it with Aaron Savali. But he's also got just a track record of being better than Aaron Savali as well. That's part of this too. I also think you have enough other guys where you can make the case for either we need to limit some innings, or there's more roster flexibility there with the optionability. Like, I think with all of those factors, like, limiting Misiorowski's innings, you can option Patrick, or if you move like a Patrick to the bullpen, he can be a shuttle guy. You can bring him, up and down, like things like that. I think that's going to come into play, and it would probably guarantee Cortez a starting role. I think that they would find a way to make it work. The other part of this too is, like we've talked about, other guys who could maybe be at risk. Like, I do think there could still be a little bit of a burden of proof of sorts on Quintana to continue pitching well if everybody gets healthy. But again, this is a decision that's pretty far down the line. I don't think we need to think too much about how it's all going to fit together for now, but I would not expect out of the bullpen for him. We got a follow-up question from someone as well, asking if there's a chance he gets a qualifying offer. Absolutely not. He's going to pitch. If he comes back when he's supposed to, he'll have pitched less than half a season. If the Brewers were to give him a qualifying offer, which is probably going to end up being somewhere around that 20 million range, they're not going to offer it. If he gets offered that after this season, he'll take it, and the Brewers would be on the hook for about a $20 million salary. They're not going to do that.
Yep, agreed. I think, maybe they have interest in bringing Cortez back, but they will not be offering a qualifying offer, because even if he did for some reason decline it, they're not getting anything out of it with what he would end up signing on a contract. I mean, it wouldn't be worth what they're risking throwing it out there with the potential for him to even accept it. So if they want him back, I think they could bring him back for quite a bit less than the qualifying offer at that point too. My guess is this is his 1 year. He leaves as a normal free agent. And the qualifying offer was something at the time of the trade that if he had a really good season, you could see them throwing it out there and having a legitimate reason to do so. But with him already basically guaranteed to miss half the season, it'd be pretty hard to be able to even just make sense of that if they did that. So like Jack said, he would absolutely accept it at that point. But just to quickly answer the bullpen part, I think, especially depending on the timing of this, but with Patrick, likely being optioned at that point beforehand, even if Woodruff is ready. The question does become Cortez or Quintana, I think, at that point. If everybody is healthy and everybody's performing, you're not optioning Miz, and that's kind of the one starter at the moment who would even be under consideration just in terms of options. It's at that point, it's Quintana or Cortez. I guess they don't want to pay a guy $8 million. I agree with you on that, but I do wonder if everyone's performing and he's the one who has the experience, if they did say at that point, perhaps he takes the DL Hall role away from DL Hall, Hall goes down, and they do use him in that type of role. I don't think they'd be thrilled about it, but I do think if everyone's healthy and performing, at some point that might end up having to be the case if they can't move him or Quintana in a trade or something along those lines. And then also you could potentially, like we've talked about, 6-man rotation would be very hard all year, but September you get the extra pitcher. I wonder if at that point that could be a way they limit Miz's innings and they have all of these guys making starts in September. So I wonder if maybe if everyone's healthy at that point, that's how we see some of this work out too. But otherwise, I'm more inclined to believe that, yeah, they'd like him to be a starter. I guess I could just see some outcomes where it makes some sense for him to be in the pen for a while.
I guess the only, like, it's a little more far-fetched than I think some of these other ones. It would all have to go down in the right sequence, but as far as limiting Misiorowski's innings, I think there could be a world where he maybe gets shoved to the bullpen late in the year if he's closing in on that innings total, and if that aligns with where Cortez is at, maybe that's the way they go. Now, in this, like, if you were to do something like this, you can't put Misiorowski in the bullpen, shorten him up to like a 3-inning guy or something, and then move him back into the rotation.
Right.
So this would need to be like we're getting into late August or September. He's just way too close to the innings limit, but we still want to be able to use him. He's pitched out of the pen before in Nashville last year. Let's do that. Nestor starts, all this stuff. But Nestor's got to be coming back at the right time. Like, it just, I don't think that happens, but that's a possibility that's kind of floating around in my head. I don't think it's non-existent, but yeah, it's a lot of moving parts going on here as well. So I don't think it's something we need to spend too much more time on. Another question about Misiorowski from HC Purdy. He asks, is Miz eligible for Rookie of the Year? Would Milwaukee get a comp pick if he wins? And does it affect his service time? So there is no minimum time requirement to be eligible for the Rookie of the Year. You just generally don't see guys who only pitched in a handful of games getting votes, but he will be eligible. So he's going to be in the conversation, I'm sure. I think it's just a matter of, does he pick up enough innings where he's able to get all of those votes? But again, he also just doesn't have the competition that the rookie class in the NL had last year. So he's going to be in that mix. If he wins it, from my understanding, the Brewers would not get a pick because they didn't have him in the big leagues long enough to get that full year of service time just based on time spent in the big leagues. The kicker, though, is that if he finishes top 2 in Rookie of the Year, he gets that full year of service time anyway, because he would have finished top 2 for a major award. So that's how that would all shake out as far as his eligibility, and then what happens if he either wins or is in that top 2.
Yep. So basically, if he finishes in the top 2, he will be a free agent after 2030. And if he does not, he would be a free agent after 2031. But yes, you're correct on the comp pick. That is only if you are up. It's basically the full year, but it's what we talked about last week with service time and how many days you have to spend in the big leagues to get a full year of service time. If you were going to get that full year anyway, and you won Rookie of the Year, then you get that prospect performance incentive pick. And this Pirates are a good example of what happens when you don't have him up in time and then he wins, because he is now a free agent. Paul Skeens is a free agent after 2029 instead of 2030, after they held him down. Now, I saw some people actually like comping this situation to that. This is not the same. Paul Skeens was ready to pitch in the big leagues out of spring training last year. He was fully 100% ready, and the Pirates held him down for service time reasons. Jacob Misiorowski was not at that point coming out of spring training. What he did in AAA this year is what earned him the opportunity to come up. So this wasn't a service time manipulation by the Brewers. He wasn't ready. But it would be unfortunate if, because everything lined up the way it did, it looked like you were going to be able to have him for an extra year, and then you don't end up getting him because of this. And like Jack said, this is a bad rookie class. I mean, you look at last year, you had Skeens, Curio, and Merrill. That was one of the best you've had in a long time. This is very much the opposite. Drake Baldwin, who's basically a part-time catcher for the Braves at this very moment, is probably the other favorite at this time. So if Miz stays healthy and pitches the majority of the season, I think I'd probably be more surprised if the Brewers don't lose a year of control than if they do at this point, just with everything you're looking at. Like, it's a really bad rookie class, and I think that's playing a big role here. But even if he's just average and stays healthy, I think he probably finishes top 2 at that point, just with the stuff he has and everything else. So most likely I'm kind of banking on him being a 2030 free agent in my head right now, just given all of the circumstances surrounding it.
Steve asks, if there hadn't been so many Wednesday night softball rainouts, does Jack catch that foul ball on Tuesday nights? I suppose you want me to tell the whole story, don't you?
Oh, I would love to hear the whole story, yes.
All right, well, since I'm a man of the people, I will oblige. To answer the question, no, because I don't think playing softball helps me catch a foul ball in a $5 fishing hand net. But I would guess most people who are listening are probably aware of this by now, but if you haven't heard the full story, William Contreras hit a foul ball back toward the press box. To preface this too, like, I've told the story of the Nets, so I would imagine most people listening know what the deal is with the net. But I had the net sitting by me. Contreras hits a screamer coming right back at me, and instead of trying to jump ship, I wanted to catch it, so I grabbed the net. But this ball is coming almost right for my head, and I don't want to catch it with the net right in front of my face and in front of my chest, because if I miss or if the ball goes through the net, because I'm not sure how much faith I have in the structural integrity of this thing, I don't want it to either drill me in the face or right in the heart. So what I'm trying to do is shift. So the ball was coming at me. I'm trying to shift my chair to my right so that I can hold the net to the left of my body and try to catch it in the net like that. I shift my weight to the right, and instead of the chair moving to the right, the chair just tips over to the right. So I hit the deck. I'm on the ground, all sprawled out. I still have like a bruise on the back of my leg from where the chair landed on me. But otherwise, the only thing that was injured was my ego, what was left of it. And I would imagine this is the part that everybody's seen. I come back to the press box the next morning to find that the great Adam McCalvey has shown up early and spent his entire morning creating a duct tape outline of me sprawled out on the floor of the press box. I should have pulled the tweet up right now on video to show the pictures, but I'm guessing everybody has seen them anyway. So I give him credit for that. It was actually really well done. Outside of like, I think the way he did the hair, my hair looks kind of stringy because it was just like the pieces of tape, but otherwise very well done. Because I would like to retain the very little that's left of my dignity, I am now retiring from trying to catch foul balls with the press box net. Andrew Wagner can try his hand at it. Kurt can try his hand at it too if he wants to, because he's usually sitting to my right. Wags is to my left. But yeah, I think there were a lot of people sitting below who, even if they didn't see me go down, they saw a whole commotion and they saw me get back up. I don't know. I'm just happy that it wasn't aired on TV. Although now that I'm saying that, maybe someone will dig up the footage and it's going to get some airtime in the future. Who knows? But yeah, that's what happened. I'm 0 for 3 now on press box foul balls. In the words of Matt Erickson, Brewers infield coach, that means that I have never felt success before. And I guess I never will.
Yeah, you're going out on the bottom. You're not going out on top.
No, I'm not. Well, that's because I don't think I'm getting to the top. I think there's more room. I've learned that there's more room to go down than there is to go up. I said something to the other guys sitting by me in the press box that I'm like that hitter who there comes a point in every athlete's career where you're just making a fool of yourself by continuing to try, and that seems to be what's happening to me. So I think it's time to hang him up.
No, that's fair. You can retire the fishing net. The outline was great work, and I knew you were going to comment on the hair. If you're ever there's one thing you don't mess with Jack, and that's the hair, and it's
That's
for good
correct.
reason. It's for good
Yes.
reason. It's for good reason. He has great hair. We always joke on the college team that if you pull up his profile picture, you might guess that he's like the best pitcher on our staff, and in reality, he's our analytics guy. But he's just got like the look of a pitcher, and the hair is
Oh,
what
yeah.
does it. So
In reality, I'm doing what I do now because I was such a bad athlete that I had to quit baseball in high school and start working toward the stuff I'm doing now. So, like, in a way, I am where I am because I was such a bad baseball player, like athletically. And I have no problem admitting that because it's the truth.
well, that's fair. But the good news is that people don't know that until you tell them that, and we can use you as an intimidating force on our website. But either way, no, I mean that was actually a moment, funny enough, that I did not catch because I was at a coaches meeting that you weren't at. But it
Because I
was
was busy sprawled out on the floor. Yes.
I'm aware. But no, that was a great moment to walk out of the meeting and find out about, and very well told on the story. I fully understand how it happens. Sometimes those rolling chairs get locked up and things go sideways. I get it. So I appreciate you showing yourself at your low point there and putting it all out there for the world to hear. But no, you're selling yourself short though, because I do think a couple more softball games and you might have had it. I think you got screwed by Mother Nature, and
Maybe.
I know you don't use a net out there, but the hand-eye coordination might have been lacking a little bit with how many games got rained out recently. I think you would have had it. I had faith in you if we would have had a little more experience under our belt this summer.
Well, if people can believe it, I play first base in softball. So my job is to catch the ball, and I usually catch it because that's my job. But again, it's a little bit different with the glove versus
Yes.
using the net as an extension. I was talking to somebody last night, and they said, you know what, a better comp would probably be not like softball or baseball to what you're trying to do, but like lacrosse, because you're catching it. It's like an extension. You're not catching it with your hands, so the coordination's a little bit different. Wagner was joking that we need to start giving me pregame reps. So they're going to send somebody out into the loge level beneath the press box during pregame, and they're going to chuck balls to me with the net, and I got to actually get the form down of catching it. But no, I promise I can catch a baseball. I can throw a baseball too. You've seen me throw.
I have.
Like a bullpen before. This was like 3 years ago, so it looks way worse now than it did back then. But there have been times where I've looked like a somewhat real, really crappy pitcher, but I've done it before.
You have. I've seen it. I will vouch for you.
What did I hit in that bullpen? I think 65 is what I topped out at.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Well.
Yep.
I was actually working on I was playing catch with somebody a few days ago, and I was working on a slider grip. I think I got like it's a pretty good gyro.
We'll get you on Rapsodo again.
Getting the hang of it, yeah. We were I'm telling press box stories now and running the runtime up, but Dave Gasper for 97.3, and he writes for Athlon Brewers as well. He purportedly threw 81 miles an hour when 97.3 had like their fan event at one of the games a couple weeks ago, and he purportedly hit 81 when they were testing out their speed pitch setup. So now none of us are buying this because like none of the rest of us we know can even get close to this. So we're trying to see if we can organize the entire press box getting an opportunity to like get loose and throw a legitimate bullpen with the radar guns and with the tech and all this stuff. And we want to figure out who on press row has the best fastball. So if that ends up coming to fruition, I'm sure everybody will hear updates about it, and whoever ends up winning, whether it is Dave Gasper or somebody else, if it happens, everyone will hear about it. They'll hear about it from the winner.
we'll share. No, we're sharing all of the data that we collect from whoever's throwing. We're getting induced vertical break. We're getting
Oh, I know.
everything on
I want to
spin
get the
rate.
wrap photo out, and I want to track all of this. Like, we're
If
going to
this
get
happens,
all the metric. So we're not just going like we'll have who throws the hardest, but then who's actually got the best stuff when you consider
yeah,
spin and movement and angles and all of this.
we'll get this organized. We're gonna figure this out, and when it
Yeah,
does happen, we'll be sure to share it. It might come from the podcast account. Who knows?
we'll see. Yeah, when, not if. I like the
Yep.
optimism. But as long as we're talking about player development, kind of, you want to talk about the player development of real athletes in the minor league sandbox?
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. We got some questions this week, which I always enjoy. So, a couple draft questions to start off from HC Purdy, who asked, "What do you think of Xavier Nyans?" I believe that's how it's pronounced. A high school third baseman. Do you think he would be a good pick at 20? So, I am a fan of Nyans. So he's, I mean, very physical, well built high schooler, big time power, big bat speed, and just a big dude. He's 6'4", probably still going to get a little bigger as he continues to develop as well, but already a big dude. And he's athletic. He moves well for his size. I think there's actually a pretty decent hit tool there on top of the power, and he does a really good job of elevating the ball. So he's hitting the ball at ideal launch angles to get to the power in games. There's a little bit of a hitch when I watch the swing, but nothing too bad. I think it's kind of similar to like Jesus Mate's switch, where I wonder maybe early on he might be a little behind fastballs or behind velo. Um, but I did see some people talking about how he had started to become a little passive, which also makes him a fit for the Brewers because the Brewers have a lot of passive hitters in their organization. Brock Wilken, Luke Adams, those types. He's got a cannon of an arm. He's touched 96 on the mound, but he also has a good enough arm to play third base. He could also probably move to like a right field if needed because he is such a good athlete. I'm a big fan of Nyans. I think there's a pretty decent chance he's not there at 20. If I'm honest, I could very easily see him going before that. But if he is there, I like him. So that leads into the other question we got from Cheesehead Kami, who asked, in the run up to the draft, who are you looking at as prospects you hope the Brewers take? I saw this question first. I actually listed Nyans as one of the guys that I'd be interested in. Another high school bat that I like is Steele Hall, who's committed to Tennessee. He moved up from the 2026 class, reclassified into the 2025 class. So he'll be 18 years old just before the draft starts, young for his class, probably 80 grade run, like speed. He's very, very fast. The swing, it kind of gives me like Bryce Terang type of profile, except he's hitting the ball harder than Terang was at this point in his high school career. But he struggles to maybe barrel stuff up all the time. Yeah, maybe a guy for the torpedo bat. Maybe that'd be a guy who would work for that. But some scouts think he can get to like 15 to 20 home run power, but there's going to be a ton of speed. He can most likely stick at shortstop. And if not, maybe even move to center because he's so fast and he's so athletic. A middle of the field player, basically, is what it comes down to with some pop, good bat to ball skills, and just some refinement needed in the profile. But I'm a big fan of Steele Hall. I like Slater DeBrun, another high school player who's committed to Vanderbilt. He maybe actually South Freelick, like now that I think about it, but I think he's got more power than Freelick did as well. It's kind of similar to Slade Caldwell, who I liked a lot in last year's draft, drafted by the Diamondbacks and off to a really good start in pro ball, but doesn't chase, hits the ball when it's in the zone. He's only 5'9", but again, there's some power here. Almost you could see Caldwell's already showing it, and DeBrun's taller than him. I like his swing from the left side. He's very fast. He's a solid defender in center field or in the outfield in general. And I'm a big fan of DeBrun. And the other high school name that I have seen connected to the Brewers a little bit is Daniel Pierce, Georgia commit. I think there's more power coming for him, and he's starting to swing the bat harder from what I have read. I like his swing. I like his approach. The only thing that could happen here is there's like some Cooper Pratt concerns defensively, where does he get too tall and too big to play shortstop and potentially have to move off of shortstop? But the arm should stick at third if needed. And I do know everybody that I've read anything on says he just gets great makeup grades. Everybody loves him as a person and as a teammate and everything else. So that's interesting. Somebody to watch. This is going to go long now that I'm thinking about it, because I have a lot of info on these college, on these draft picks, but that's fine. Some college bats I like. Gavin Killen. He is actually from Milton, Wisconsin. He was at Tennessee this year. He started at Louisville. Just a pure hitter. I've talked about him on here before, actually, but like he's hitting the ball hard while also still hitting the ball consistently. So he had really good bat to ball skills at Louisville, and he didn't really have the power showing as much. And then his final year at Louisville, it started to show up, and it started to show up again in 2025. Max exit velo of 111 with the metal bat. That probably goes down a little bit, but there's still physical development there. I'm just a fan. I think he could play shortstop, if not a pretty good bat at second base. Ethan Conrad is a guy who's been hurt for a while now out of Wake Forest. He started at Marist. He's an outfielder with probably plus raw power, but he does. He's got some ground ball to his game where it doesn't really show up as much in games as it should. He's got pretty good bat to ball skills, nothing great. I think he's a really solid player. He's probably not pick 20 for me, but somebody I like at the comp round pick. And then my last college hitter is Alex Lodice. He was at North Florida to start his career. Really, really good start. Not crazy fast, but he's a good runner, and he has a cannon of an arm, so he should stick on the left side of the infield. He was a very good defender in college. The hit is a little interesting. I don't think there's a ton of hit tool here, but there is big time power. And when he's shown, he chases a lot. He swings hard. I think there's kind of what we talked about with Churio earlier, a case to be made that he could be somebody who you don't actually want taking a ton of walks, and you get a ton of power out of him that way with great defense and solid speed on the left side of the infield, which could be valuable. Some college arms I like. Patrick Forbes from Louisville is probably my favorite for that number 34 pick. I don't know if he makes it there or not, but I'm hoping he does. Fastball with good carry, vertical approach angle of negative 3.8, negative 4 pretty much every time. High spin, 2,600 RPMs on it, getting up to the upper 90s. There's a good slider here. He added a cutter this year, so the Brewers always like guys with that. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of his profile. He also throws more of a sinker, but I think that might not be. I think this four seam is his better pitch. Gage Wood, everyone knows that name if they followed the College World Series at all. The 19 strikeout no hitter for Arkansas. I would love that pick at 20. I mean, the stuff is nasty. He can get up to 100. Very good carry on it. Again, great vertical approach angle. The curveball's nasty. The slider's nasty. And he also added a harder cutter in the low 90s this year. Big fan of Gage Wood. I think even if he hadn't thrown the no-hitter, he would have flown up draft boards, but he really is now. One other name I'll throw out quickly, not going to talk so much about him, Tanner Franklin from Tennessee. I don't get why he's not higher on boards. I really like him. Seen him up to 99. Great fastball shape. Again, added a cutter this year, so that's been very common. And it's a nice slider, too, that spins in the upper 2,600s, 2,700 range on the spin rate. It's really a sweeper. It's 0.3 induced vertical break with negative 9.3 horizontal break for Tanner Franklin. That's a name that I could see being like a really nice second round pick or competitive balance second round pick or something. And then one high school arm I have to throw out there just because I have others, but I'm going so long on this. Josh Flores. He's actually from the same high school as Griffin Tobias and Josh Adamszewski. So the Brewers have been in there. He's committed to Kentucky. Now, this is not going to be as low of a signing bonus as those two were, as Tobias and Adamszewski were. He's committed to Kentucky. He's been up to 97. He pitched in the MLB Combine and looked very good. Disgusting slider in the upper 80s with 2,900 RPMs. And it's late, sharp break, and he kind of has two different shapes on it. And then he throws a curveball that some people think is going to be a potential 70 grade pitch. He's ranked in like the hundreds right now. I could easily see him being a day one type of pick just with this type of stuff. And he is barely going to be 18 years old on draft day. So that's maybe the one I would watch the most in terms of like a random high schooler that might surprise people just in terms of the ranking, but it would make a lot of sense when you factor in everything I just talked about. Last question I have. Kevin asked, if you were to give a pro comparison to Marco Dingus, Brock Wilken, and Luke Adams, what would they be? And he said, if you have any others off the top of your head for anyone else, what would they be? I didn't go any further than these three. And to be honest with everyone, I'm not like a huge comp guy. I don't love it. And it's something I'm probably not very good at in general either. But I'll do my best. I think if Dingus is reaching, and these are going to be more like ideal outcome comps for these guys, but Real Muto for Dingus makes a lot of sense. He's a good athlete, a really good athlete back there. The strikeouts aren't crazy low like Will Smith, who I was kind of looking at too. His strikeout rate's pretty low. Real Muto's been more in like that 23 to 25 range, which I think is where Dingus will settle with a very aggressive swing like he has. But the power's there. There's some stolen base ability for a catcher, cannon of an arm, really athletic catcher, like the prime of Real Muto. If Dingus works out exactly how you hope he does, that's kind of who I envision him being. For Wilken, I put Eugenio Suarez, a guy who strikes out a decent amount, draws a decent amount of walks, and then just hits for a lot of power with pretty low average. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for. Wilken might be a little better defender at third. That wouldn't shock me, but I think that's kind of what I'd look at. And then Luke Adams was the hardest one. There are very few people like him, but I settled on righty Matt Carpenter. Maybe a little more stolen base ability for Adams, who's probably faster and more aggressive on the bases than Carpenter was, but super high on base. Carpenter got hit by quite a few pitches in his prime, actually, too. Started showing power a little later in his minor league and then major league career at times. And I kind of like that one. That one might honestly be my favorite just because it feels more realistic probably than the other ones, but that's kind of who I envision there. We talked about Wilken's injury earlier. I won't rehash that one, but Luke Adams, on that note, does also find himself on the 7-day IL currently. He had a left shoulder contusion after colliding with the catcher at home plate about a week ago now. It looked worse than a shoulder contusion in the moment, so hopefully that's all it ends up being. To this point, that's all we've heard. So moving into the last part here, we'll talk about some hitters, and then I think I've got 4 or 5 pitchers as well. On the hitting side, a couple of ACL or Arizona Complex League players. I talked about Handel Fry Encarnacion last week. He's at an 886 OPS this year now. He had a homer a couple days ago that was wild to see on video. I tweeted out the video, but he was just way out in front of the pitch. And he somehow basically reloaded and then just launched a homer on it. He's running a 15.5% strikeout rate this year. He hit a ball 113 miles per hour the other day on StatCast. He's got some home run pop. He's got legitimate hard hit ability, and he's not striking out. I expect more swing and miss eventually because there is a lot of effort in his swing, and a 15.5% strikeout rate doesn't feel reasonable to expect. But I don't think he's going to be a huge strikeout guy, and I think there's ability to hit the ball really hard. So he's one I want to see in Carolina soon. I'm hoping he gets a call soon. We talked about Jaden Fielder last week as well, but he hit another home run this week. The Brewers PD posted some good video of his last 2 homers and one of his triples. He's up to a 148 WRC plus in the ACL, and his K rate's down to 23.6 after starting very high. That's been going down significantly week over week. I think he's a real prospect. Now, I'm not saying he's like a top 30 guy or even a top 50 guy in the system at the moment, but he's also not Prince Fielder's son who's just in the organization because he's Prince Fielder's son. He's hitting the ball hard. He is, according to scouts down there, he has a great approach in general, just not chasing much, just very patient and getting his pitch to hit and then unloading on it. They might have found one here, which is pretty cool considering the family bloodlines. Sticking in the ACL quickly, Pedro Ibargüen was promoted to Carolina. This was his second season in the ACL after a really good debut in the DSL where he had a 139 WRC plus. He moved to the Complex League at 17 and had a 49 WRC plus last year, striking out 30% of the time. This year in his return, strikeout rate cut in half all the way down to 14, and he had a 135 WRC plus with 2 homers and 12 steals. I'm not sure I have super high hopes, but I do think there's something here, and just it'll be fun to watch him in Carolina and see how he holds his own at that level. Speaking of Carolina and speaking of young players, Luis Pena this week had a 983 OPS. He had 3 doubles and a triple, 4 steals. He's at a 141 WRC plus on the season, and he is 32 of 38 on stolen base attempts. Eric Batanti had a good week, 1250 OPS this week, 3 homers, a double, 118 WRC plus on the season. Now that has gone up significantly, but he is still sporting an insane 39.3% whiff rate. That's going to have to come down. That's just not ever going to play as you get further up the levels. Jose Anderson also striking out and whiffing quite a bit still, but he had a 1056 OPS this week. He hit 2 homers, a double, and a triple. Starting to figure out low A, I think, but again, he's at a 37.2% whiff rate, so still very, very high for him. Couple AA players to finish off the hitting section here. Cooper Pratt has a 953 OPS this past week. He had a homer, his 5th of the season. He had 2 doubles. He's now up to a 114 WRC plus in AA as one of the younger players at the level. He has 5 homers. His walk rate's 10.5%, and his strikeout rate is only 14.3%. He's also only whiffing at a 21.5% rate. So seeing some of the power show up this week while he continues to have really good bat to ball abilities and not go out of the zone a ton. He does chase. There's chase in the game, and that's something they want him to clean up, I know. But starting to see him kind of figure things out at the plate at the AA level, which is nice to see. And then on the opposite side of the AA spectrum, you have Ethan Murray, who's been there for at least 3 years now. He had a 1300 OPS this week with 2 homers. I think he's a utility guy at his absolute ceiling, but he plays good defense at all the spots. He had a strong 2023, and then he had a very tough 2024 with a bunch of injuries and just poor play. But he's had a really good bounce back this year. He's had some injuries again, but he's had 133 plate appearances. Murray has a 172 WRC plus in that time, a 930 OPS, and 6 homers, which ties his career high already. So another guy who probably deserves a shot in AAA. Moving finally to the pitching side of things, Yohan Pena, I mentioned last week. He had gone 4 shutout with 3 hits, 2 walks, and 7 strikeouts last week. This week he went 5 shutout, 3 hits, no walks, and 9 strikeouts. Again, he's 17 all year. He's up to 91, sitting in the upper 80s. Big, nasty curveball. Like, they posted some video on Brewers PD, and the curveball was very much the featured pitch. It'll be interesting to see how that plays as he moves up and if he can lean on it as much as he seems to be right now. But there's a decent looking changeup as well. Griffin Tobias in the ACL had his best start of the season so far. He went 5 1/3 innings, shutout, 3 hits, no walks, 5 strikeouts. He has a 5.68 ERA in the ACL, but he also has a 24-1 strikeout to walk ratio. He's also hit two batters, but still 24-3 then in hit by pitches or free passes. And yeah, interesting to see good to see a nice start from him. I talked about some of the StatCast data on last episode. Finishing off with 3 pitchers in the upper levels or non-rookie levels. Tyson Harden made his second AA start, and he went 6 innings, 1 earned, 6 hits, no walks, and 6 strikeouts. Continues to rack up strikeouts at a solid rate, continues to not walk anybody, and just the performance in his first 2 starts in AA don't show him slowing down anytime soon. Melvin Hernandez, I've talked about a lot this year. He went 6 shutout, 4 hits, no walks, 8 strikeouts. He now has a 2.4 ERA in 63 2/3 innings. He'll only turn 19 next week. I wrote about him at Brewer Fanatic. You can read some of that in my observations from this past week. And then Ethan Dorches had his second low A appearance. I also wrote about this one in that same article. He went 3 innings, 2 hits, 1 earned, no walks, 6 strikeouts. Just watching him, I mean, the splitter is filthy. The fastball's in that 92, 93 range with some decent carry to it. And then he's throwing the cutter a lot. He's got a sinker that looks pretty good. And then he throws a slider as well. So it's a 5-pitch mix, good pitchability. He's 6'6". He's built really well. Really nice find by the Brewers. He'll be 18 all season as well. So that'll wrap it up. I made sure we still got pretty close to our 2-hour recording here, Jack, but I think you can't start asking me draft questions, guys, because that's when I start going. I go in on those a little bit, but I'm excited about that. And we should figure something out, Jack. We have to have some sort of draft episode as we get closer to that, like we did last year. We'll have to see if we can make that work. But yeah, another very fun week in the Brewers minor league system. It's hard to find one that isn't exciting at this point.
And a very fun week on the Brewer Fanatic podcast. That's a really tacky way to end this one, but I had to tie it in somehow. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back with you next Friday to recap everything that goes down in the next week here. Until then, thank you for giving us almost 2 hours of your time every week. I'm not sure how you do it.